obvious point to make about Donald Trump is take him literally and seriously. He means what he says. He will do everything he can to become an absolute authoritarian leader if given the opportunity to do so. And he will pull us out of NATO.
That was the former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton this weekend at the Munich Security Conference. Her warning comes just days after Donald Trump tripled down. I don't even know if we can say that. He said it so many times at this point on his promise to not defend NATO countries if they didn't pay enough for defense. In fact, he said he would encourage Russia to attack them. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has yet to say anything publicly about the death of Alexei Navalny. Joining us now is the French ambassador to the United States, Laurent Billy. Thank you for being here, Mr. Ambassador.
Ambassador, thank you so much. Good morning to you. You have Trump's remarks coming the same week that Alexei Navalny had an untimely death. I have to wonder about the conversation that is happening among NATO members about the future of NATO.
Well, I think that for most of us, we get the impression that we have to be more vocal about the facts. And the facts are very simple, that since 2 years, Europe has changed and we are investing heavily in our defense. Most of our countries are spending now the 2%, especially the big economies like France and Germany. And also the fact that we are behind Ukraine. We spend much more than the United States on Ukraine. And so I think that's very important to have that in mind. But the real question, I think, here, it's not really about Europe or European Union spending. It's about Ukraine and what is happening in Ukraine. And the clock is ticking, and we need the supplemental because aside all the efforts that the EU is doing, we need US leadership and we need the US supplemental to help Ukraine.
Mr. Ambassador, you may have heard we're in the middle of a presidential campaign here.
So, yes.
Yeah, just a little bit. I want to put up a tweet from Nikki Haley on Trump's NATO conversation, noting 1 week ago Donald Trump encouraged Putin to invade NATO countries. Now it's been more than 24 hours since we learned of the death of Alexei Navalny, and Trump has yet to say his name. We cannot have a president who sides with murderous thugs who want to destroy America. And this kind of builds a little bit off of the question that Alicia started us with. If there's a complete collapse here in the U.S., and in the sense that you have a president sitting there who says no to NATO, yes to Putin, and yes to other thugs across Europe and the Middle East, how does NATO, you anticipate, respond? Is it President Macron? Is the Prime Minister of Great Britain? Who emerges to sort of hold that coalition together in the face of what will be happening, and to some degree is already happening with a Congress here in the United States that doesn't even want to participate by putting the aid in place? How does Europe respond, and who steps up and kind of fills that void that could emerge?
Well, we are stronger together, and I think we should definitively be with the United States on that issue. I think what we really need to make now is a case for what is at stake. It's not a regional issue. It's not a European issue. It's about the legacy of the greatest generation and somehow the kind of world that we want to let to our children or grandchildren. So we have to be there together, because when democracies are not up to the challenge, it's what happened, in fact, in Munich, something like 85 years ago, and we know the result.
Yeah.
So I think we have to stand together, and I wouldn't enter in any alternative, because we don't have an alternative. We have to stick together, and we have to make Ukraine win that war.
Donald Trump doesn't believe, essentially, in helping Ukraine. I think that's just a fair statement to make. I mean, he is encouraging Russia to do whatever he wants to, by Russia, I think he means Vladimir Putin, to do whatever he wants to NATO allies. I know that almost a week ago, President Macron met with the leaders of Poland and the leaders of Germany. And there's now conversation about how European countries need to shore themselves up, whether with nuclear powers, their military. How concerned, on a scale of 1 to 10, is Europe really about the return of Donald Trump?
For us, the real challenge is really about Ukraine. And so we have to make the case to the American people that Europe is doing its part, and quite a big part, by the way, because we spent already $100 billion. We have promised 50 billion more. And even last Friday, our president signed a security agreement with Ukraine. Germany did the same, and we commit another $10 million. Aside of that, the war is very costly for us because we also suffer something like $100 billion US dollars damage from to our economy. And also, the big difference between us is that part of this money is going back to the US in quite a significant part, both on what we are giving to Ukraine, but also on the stepping up of our military. So I think for the US, it's really also something that you have to have in mind that it's not a regional issue, it's a real challenge, and we have to be together on that.
Michael and Simone, I will spare the ambassador a question on domestic politics, but I do think it is important for the purposes of our conversation to bring up Nikki Haley's response to what Trump has been saying about NATO. This is her on X from Saturday. 1 week ago, Donald Trump encouraged Putin to invade NATO countries. Now it's been more than 24 hours since we learned of the death of Alexei Navalny, and Trump has yet to say his name. We cannot have a president who sides with murderous thugs who want to destroy America. Here's the thing, Michael, after you put yourself out there with a position like that, I'm not sure how she then comes out and endorses Donald Trump.
Yeah.
She doesn't. And that's a big problem. And I know a lot of our European allies are kind of looking at this race unfolding here in the United States and are wondering to themselves, how does this play out? At the same time you have that happening, Ambassador, you've got the New York Times reporting the nuclear space threat that Russia is beginning to pose, noting the agencies are divided on the likelihood that Putin would go so far, but nonetheless, the intelligence is an urgent concern to the Biden administration. Even if Russia does place a nuclear weapon in orbit, U.S. officials are in agreement in their assessment that the weapon would not be detonated. That's a new reality for us. And regardless of the politics that we're dealing with in presidential elections, there's still ongoing realities for NATO and the United States relative to everything else that's happening potentially globally. How is your government responding to reports like this of potential Russian behavior? Also noting the bilateral security agreement that France has signed with Zelensky. You're looking to shore up where you can and try to defend against the possibilities like that Putin is presenting.
Again, I think 2 years ago, we realized what was really today's Russia, and we see it as a threat. We see also a lot of disinformation. We just identified a big system that we call Portat Combat with 193 sites just fighting of our democracy, fueling disinformation. We have the Naval DDEF, which is some of the illustration of what an authoritarian regime is. And we have also all this news about this new weapon and all the destabilization. So Russia is really a threat, and we have to stick together against Russia.
Ambassador Billey, just one last question. What happens if the United States Congress does not provide the aid needed for the United States to purchase the weapons to send to Ukraine? What's your message to the United States Congress?
I think it's a huge responsibility. I think we are speaking about the legacy of the greatest generation. We are speaking about the world that we have been building for 75 years. We are building about an island which has bringing us peace for 75 years. So there is a lot at stake, and we never have to forget that on the front line, that the Ukrainian soldiers, the Ukrainian people which are fighting for freedoms. It's also investing in our security to support Ukraine.
Ambassador Billey, thank you so much for being with us.